Hey everyone, so today we're going to be going over the Ceaseless Whirlpool update, framing some of the item changes specifically, and then talking about how those are going to impact the Joust game mode. So in general, this update is going to come out on August 24th, so look out for that just in a couple of weeks. These changes are going to be all happening at that time and not before. So the first big change, I'm just going to scroll past all the skins and update release schedule and things like that. Like I said, August 24th, Charybdis comes out. New god, new hunter, tons of videos on that god, so check those out. I don't have any on it specifically, but there are tons of content creators that go over his abilities or her abilities and what they do. But first change, not necessarily an item change, but the Chinese Joust map from Season 3 is returning. I'm sure a ton of Joust players are going to be excited about this change. The classic Joust map just kind of got old pretty quickly for a lot of people, so this will be a nice little change. And I do have a video going over the classic Joust map, the Chinese Joust map, excuse me, if you want to take a look at that and remind yourself what that looks like, or if you've never seen it before, just familiarize yourself with that map before it comes out on the 24th. Now that that's out of the way, we can actually talk about what this video is going to be about. The item changes that are happening in the Ceaseless Whirlpool update. First one, all the support starter items, all the upgrades, the warflag, Sentinel's Gift, and Benevolence upgrades are going to only require 1,250 gold to upgrade. So these items, Benevolence is still banned in Joust, so kind of irrelevant on that front, but warflag and Sentinel's Gift are both very, very good items in Joust. Now you're going to be able to upgrade them faster, because before there were times where you hit level 17 but you didn't have enough gold. So this should eliminate some of those situations, making those items still, they were already strong as far as the starter items themselves, but now the upgrades are all stronger because you can get them earlier essentially. Bracer of Radiance getting a little bit of an update, new artwork on top of the actual change itself, which is increased movement speed aura from 10% to 15%. Don't know if that's going to be enough to really push this into any sort of meta. And the upgrade, the same thing, increase movement speed from 10 to 15% and increase the power aura from 10 to 15%. So that can be fairly significant at times. So we'll see if that changes anything. It's still, to me, I think it's a hard item to build in Joust with so many other better items. Speaking of better items, better relics, Sundering Sphere increasing the cooldown from 110 to 125, fairly significant. This was a very strong item. Now you're just not going to be able to use it as often. And the same thing with Sundering Sphere upgrade, as far as the cooldown is concerned, but also decreasing that damage amplification by 3%. So probably won't see this one as much as before, but I still think it's going to be a pretty good item in its own right against certain comps. If you think of people that have shields, Nike specifically, or Odin or Hera, any of those gods, I think it was hard to buy Sundering Sphere before, but now it just doesn't feel as bad, and you're getting just a lot more out of it. Karen's Coin, decreasing magical power from 80 to 70, and that change is also applied to the evolved Karen's Coin once you get those stacks on it. I still think this is a pretty decent item early. A lot of people were rushing this item, second with the addition of the removal of boots. So I think it can be still a useful item, but maybe not rushed quite as often. Frostbound Hammer, decreasing the health from 300 to 250, decreasing the movement speed slow from 30 to 25% for melee, and decreasing the movement speed slow from 20 to 15% for those ranged attacks. That 5% movement speed decrease is, I don't know, it's okay. I guess it's still going to be used on those warriors that can stick to you, because really in Joust, Frostbound Hammer is used for that utility, that movement speed slow. So 5%, don't know if it's enough to really quite knock it out of rotation, but you might see some of the other hammers or other items just being picked up more instead of that Frostbound Hammer. Jade, Emperor's Crown, they're increasing the physical power reduction from 20 to 25. So instead of reducing the enemy's physical power by 20. It's reducing the enemy's physical power by 25 when the enemies are in that specific radius. So this is an interesting item. I think it already had its uses, especially if you're going up against a warrior assassin comp or something like that, where you know you're going to be in that radius of the enemy gods, which Joust you kind of already are all the time. Now there's just a little bit more of that power reduction. So I think more useful as an early game item, but it gives you a little bit of power on your side if you're a support or a guardian, and it takes away power from them. So that early game potential can really, if you win the early game fights in Joust, you can kind of snowball that. So I think it's a very interesting item and one that you might want to think about slotting into your builds a little bit more often once this patch comes out. Hide of the Nemean Lion. They have changed this item quite a bit in the last year. We used to have block stacks on it at a certain point. Now they're increasing the physical protection from 75 to 80, and they're decreasing the protections needed per stack of the block from 120 to 100. So now you can still gain those block stacks at 100 protections instead of 120. I still don't know if this is going to change how much this is built. I know there's a lot of other items that are kind of prioritizing attack speed. So I just don't know if it's really going to make that much of a difference. If they're attacking so fast and you block 2 of them or 3 of them instead of 2, I think it's more useful in the crit meta when you could just avoid any of that damage altogether. But I guess we'll see. It's a little bit better than it was, but it's still nowhere near where it used to be. So I think it's going to be fairly rare that you build this item. Bulwark of Hope, increasing magical protections from 60 to 80, which is fairly significant. I would say almost very significant. And the shield provided by Bulwark of Hope will now be based on 15% of the holder's maximum health instead of 150 plus 10 per level. So it's going to benefit those supports or tanks a lot more than somebody else who's building it to survive. I think this is going to be a really good item in the next update for tanks specifically. That has a ton of health in some cases, and the increased magical protections is going to put it up there in competition with some of those other items in the same tree. So if you're looking for that survivability, you're trying to survive that one big burst, you're diving and you're getting killed, Bulwark is a really, really, really good item. Stone of Fall recently got a rework in a couple updates ago now. It's getting another buff, another round of buffs actually, so increasing the health from 150 to 200, increasing physical protection from 30 to 40, increasing magical protection from 30 to 40, and then increasing the passive buff from 2% to 3% per stack. So this is a pretty rare item that you probably don't see built a lot, so I just wanted to open up the Smite wiki quick and kind of go over the item itself. It has 150 health, that's going to 200, 35 magical power going to 40, 30 magical physical protection going to 40, and 30 magical protection going to 40. And the passive itself, when you hit an enemy god with a basic attack, you gain a stack of Fall's Blessing, giving you 2% damage mitigation per stack. At 3 stacks, you gain double the damage mitigation and 20% CCR. That's a 10-second is how long that lasts. So if we go back to the buff itself, instead of 2% damage mitigation per stack, you're getting 3%. So at 3 stacks, instead of a maximum of 6% damage mitigation, doubling that at 3 stacks, so 12% total. Now you're going to have 3% stacks on each of those for 3 stacks at 9%. If you double that, that goes to 18%. So overall, you're getting another 6% extra of that damage mitigation. A pretty interesting item. When this first came out, I saw a few people doing some weird things like putting it on Ao Kuang, where he'd have a ton of damage mitigation because he had a ton of attack speed and could apply those stacks very easily. I haven't found a Guardian that it works that well on. The closest thing I've gotten is Terra, just because her auto attack's slow now on top of it if she has her stones up. So that's the one that I can think of. Yorm doesn't proc it, so it's kind of niche. I could see maybe someone like Kabrakan using it I don't know. It's an interesting item. I think it can be useful. I think it just kind of takes too much to make it useful. But maybe this increase in protections and passive protections and mitigations will actually put it back into the meta. And like I said, if you are building some weird sort of attack speed hybrid guardian and that works for you, this could be an item that you slot into your build. Black Thorn Hammer, increasing physical power from 35 to 40 and increasing health from 350 to 400. This was a very, very popular item way back in the day, but really nobody builds it anymore. So I think some of this buff is needed. Again, not quite sure if it's going to bring it into the meta at all, but might be able to compete a little bit more with the Frostbound of the world, since that got a nerf too. Staff of Mutant is another item that was recently kind of adjusted after a brief period of brokenness in PTS. They kind of scaled it back a little bit, but it's an item that really doesn't see much use at all. So what they're going to do is increase the duration of the passive it has from 4 to 6 seconds. And if you don't know what that passive is, let's just read through it. When your ultimate ability has finished casting, you gain Mutant's Brilliance, which provides 70% uncapped CDR, decaying to 40% over 4 seconds. So that decay is going to just take a little bit longer, so you should be able to get a couple more ability rotations off. Again, kind of a very niche item that is a little bit weird. I get what they're trying to do with it, but it hasn't really slotted into a whole lot of builds, and I don't know if that extra 2 seconds on the decay is really going to make a huge difference. Maybe on certain gods that can go through 2 rotations of their abilities instead, but I think that case is very, very rare. Dominance, increasing the basic attack bonus penetration from 10 to 15%. Overall, I think this is one of the cheaper options in that tree. But compared to like Transcendence or Hydra's Lament, which has its very specific uses, it was just not really a item that was picked up. I think this can be beneficial in the early game in Joust, specifically if you have that 15% pen on a second tier item on basic attacks. That's pretty good, and you'll be able to do quite a bit of damage, even if they start like the other team starts Thieves or something, right? You're going to have some of that bonus pen right away in the game. And one of the nicest things about having that extra percent pen is you don't have to worry about building percent pen later in certain cases. You may still want to, but realistically, it just flexes up your build a little bit for hunters. So I think this is something that you're going to want to maybe experiment with once this item comes out, because it could end up replacing 2 other items that you were building for penetration instead. And then you get opened up to maybe another defensive item if you need it, or I think it just brings more flexibility to the hunter builds, or any sort of builds where you're struggling to fit pen in, and you're having to build items that you don't necessarily want to just to get that percent pen. Vampiric Shroud, decreasing magical power from 30 to 25. So this item was built quite a bit. They're also decreasing the health and heal proc from 2% to 1.5 on the Blood-Soaked Shroud, and the mana heal proc from 2% to 1.5%. I still think this is a really good item in Joust, specifically if you are bringing somebody into Joust that can really use some of that lifesteal, or even if you're playing against 2 physical gods on the other side, some of that physical protection that Vampiric Shroud brings is just invaluable in surviving some of those fights that you wouldn't be able to survive before. So a little bit less magical power, a little less health heal, a little less mana heal, but I still think these are going to be pretty good items, especially if you're going a bruiser mage like Zhang Kui or someone like that, who you're really trying to be in those fights and survive. Conduit Gem, increasing the magical power from 25 to 30. So I think with the popularity in Vampiric Shroud and Sands of Time just kind of taking those slots over, they needed to try to do something with Conduit Gem. So they're increasing that power from 25 to 30, which if you're still trying to get some of the burst out of this item early on, it can be a really good option. Or if you need that little bit of extra clear on a mage that doesn't necessarily clear that well, I think conduit is a good option too. I think any of the mage starters are viable in Joust in certain scenarios, so I don't think it's a huge change or going to shift the meta up that much. But I think it's just a little bit of an improvement to the current conduit gem. So mannequin scepter, probably not a change that you're going to feel, but it looks like there's a little bit of leeway for the health restore. So if the damage over time on the mannequin's burn fades, even if a camp dies, shortly after that debuff has gone, you're still going to get some of that health restore back. So not that specific in this change, so probably have to bring this into like jungle practice to see what the actual change looks like itself. But in the end, it should be a nice little positive change for mannequin scepter that should feel better. Bumba's dagger, increasing basic attack damage on jungle camps from 20 to 25, and increasing the ability damage on jungle camps from 30 to 35%. I think this item could already be pretty viable in Joust as is. It allows you to clear camps really quickly, get into the jungle, clear the camp, and get out as quickly as possible, because that's kind of what you want to do in at least the classic Joust game mode. And for the new Chinese map, you do have a enemy's blue buff that's a little bit more accessible to you, and you can do things like hit it over the wall from lane. So this might be the item that you want to try to steal those jungle camps, or just do a little bit more in the jungle for this next iteration of Joust. With you're going to have some harpies in the jungle. You're going to have the bull demon king also that you have to worry about. So I think this is going to be an even more valuable item. It's kind of hard to slot in sometimes, depending on who your comp contains. But realistically, that's a lot of extra damage on those jungle camps with abilities and with basic attacks. So I think this will bring it back a little bit from where it has been. Bumba's Hammer is getting a little bit of an upgrade, so it's increasing that cooldown from 10% to 20%, which it already was before. This is an upgrade to Bumba's Dagger, the starter item, so in Joust specifically, you don't always reach level 20. And if you do, it's going to be fairly late game. But it does affect the starter items that you build, because you can eventually get there, and you want the item that you're building to be worth it. Before, Bumba's Dagger just didn't really have that attractive of an option between Bumba's Spear or Bumba's Hammer as an upgrade. The increased cooldown from 10 to 20%, I really don't think that makes a huge difference in Joust specifically, because it's already late game. You're most likely going to have some cooldown already. 10% isn't a huge difference. So realistically, although this is a nice little change to Bumba's Hammer, and the item was already pretty good itself. Like, I shouldn't say good, but it's viable. It's just that it doesn't have some of the impact late game that some of the other upgrades had, and that you could build early. The starter would feel good, and then you wouldn't feel bad about having to upgrade to one of these two paths later. So let's just look at Bumba's Hammer quick as a review. 300 health, 200 mana. This is going to be 20% cooldown reduction. After casting an ability, your next basic attack deals an additional 80 true damage, which that can add up, especially if you have an assassin that can rotate through abilities very quickly, like Tsukuyomi. He's got those ranged basics, so that damage can stack up very, very quickly. And then after hitting a basic attack empowered by Bumba's Hammer, your cooldowns are reduced by 1 second, and you're healed for 5% of your maximum health. So again, late game, this is an item that you can really, really just stay in the fight with. If you're rotating your abilities and hitting them and hitting your abilities, you're just going to get tons of cooldown, tons of cooldown reduction, and you're going to be able to just kind of shred those fights as long as you need to. And then the second upgrade to Bumba's Dagger is Bumba's Spear, getting a pretty big shift. So it's not going to provide health anymore. It's going to provide 10% pen instead. It's going to have 10 more physical power, 15 more magical power, and it's going to increase the power buff duration from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. So 20 extra seconds is actually enormous. You're essentially going to have that power buff for 3 times as long as you had it for originally, which is going to let you fight longer. It's going to let you do more damage. And with that 10% pen, you should be a little bit more effective in those fights too. So let's look at the old bumbas spear quick. So before it was 60 physical, that's going to 70, 90, it's going to 105. No more health. You're still going to have the cooldown reduction. And the passive is your basic attacks deal 50 true damage, so 30 less damage than comparing it to Bumba's Hammer. But your abilities are going to deal 50% damage against those camps, structures, jungle bosses. If those die, you get that 10% power buff. Now instead of 10 seconds, it's going to be 30 seconds, and you're still healed for 10% of their health and 10% of your mana. So if you think of the new Joust map, the Chinese Joust map, the jungle boss is the Bull Demon King. So you're going to want to fight around that at a certain point. If you kill that Bull Demon King, you're going to get 30 seconds of a 10% power buff. You should win that fight after that. If the other team is contesting at all and you have 10% power for 30 seconds and you're at full build as a, maybe you're a mage or an assassin, but at full build, you should win that fight after that. Again, it is all dependent on if you ever reach level 20, which isn't a guarantee in Joust specifically. I think the games may go longer in the Chinese Joust map, but I also remember them snowballing fairly quickly as well if somebody, some team gets that red buff and then invades blue, and it just really depends. So I think it still is, both of these upgrades are better than they were before, which makes Bumba's dagger more attractive than it was before. But I don't think any class outside of assassins are going to be using this tree, which is kind of how it should be. Protector of the Jungle also getting a little bit of a shift, increasing the passive power increase from 12% to 15%. That does not include the protection increase, which is 12% when you're in the jungle. And increasing physical power from 55 to 65, which is what it was before. And increasing magical power from 80 to 100, which it was before. So let's look at the item now to just kind of reacquaint ourselves with it. 1,500 cost, 2,100, 2,150 total. 55 physical power, 80 magical power, so those are going to 65 and 105. Right, 55 and 100, excuse me. And 35 physical protection at 25% plus attack speed. Well, in the jungle, you gain 12% power and 12% protections. So this item is really only if you're I shouldn't say it's only effective, but it's most effective if you're fighting in the jungle, which I think you are going to be doing a little bit more of that in this next Joust map with some of the jungle buffs that are closer to each other, that are a lot more easy to rush or hit from lane, or just things like that. And you also have the BDK, which is deep in the jungle, and even if you're both fighting at that area, it's going to take a while for people to leave the jungle, so you're going to have that passive effect for longer. I just don't know if this is the way you want to go. Eye of the Jungle is not that great of a starter item in Joust, especially in the new map. There are less jungle camps actually than there were in the classic Joust game mode. So I just don't think this is an item that is really going to be built too often. And then also the other upgrade to Eye of the Jungle, which is Seer of the Jungle, is getting a little bit of a shift. Increasing physical power from 60 to 70, increasing magical power from 90 to 105, and increasing the passive duration from 15 to 20 seconds. So 5 seconds, a little bit more. 30% attack speed, 25 physical protections, 90 magical power, which is going to 105, and 60 magical power, which is going to 70. The passive is you deal 30% increased damage to jungle monsters and bosses. Upon defeating that jungle monster or boss, you gain the ability to see wards for 15 seconds. So that's moving to 20 seconds. Again, I don't think this is the upgrade you want to go to if you're building Eye of the Jungle. I don't think Eye of the Jungle is the starter that you want anyways, but if you built it by chance, I really think you're going to want to go to Protector of the Jungle. I don't see any case that you're building this in Joust. There's just not, you don't get enough of a benefit from seeing wards. So yeah, that's my thoughts on these two little upgrades. Gilded Arrow, obviously this was a hugely meta starter item a few patches ago. They're decreasing the cost from 700 to 650, and they're increasing the basic attack power from 15 to 20. So a little bit less expensive. But again, I think that the change that happened before, which was reducing some of the crit on it, is still just going to be not quite enough to make this come back into the hunter meta. With Bluestone being good on ability hunter still, with Cowl being as good as it is, I think that those are still just the two that you're going to want to go for. I guess with Gilded, you do get some of the gold. So if that's something that you're missing because Benevolence has been removed, this might still be an option. But I just think, again, there are better items as starters in Joust. Warflag increasing the gold reward from 8 to 10. So I initially thought that this item was going to be really, really good with the latest round of changes, especially with Benevolence not being in the Joust game mode. You want to make up for that gold somewhere as a support. And now this is increasing that gold reward to 10. So now you can be a little bit more aggressive. You can spike that gold gain if you're really playing that dive heavy game. So I do think that this is, I already thought that Sentinels and Warflag are almost must builds in Joust. You can upgrade them at 17. I think Guardians are strong in Joust in general, so it just makes sense to have the stronger items. This will be a good item. Like I said, if you're worried about the gold that you're losing from Benevolence, Warflag should make up for that if you're playing aggressive. Benevolence, decreasing the experience and gold earned from any time you would gain either resource from 90 to 85%, and the full loss reward still goes to an ally within 40 units of you. Again, not so relevant for Joust, not in the game mode, might come back, so keep an eye on it, but as of right now, not in Joust specifically. And same with Animosity, decreasing that damage proc from 4% of your maximum health to 3% of your maximum health. Little less damage on those Animosity procs, but realistically, doesn't matter in Joust because those items are not in the game mode. So that's it. That's all the item changes that are happening. Again, as a reminder, this patch comes out on August 24th, so you still have a couple weeks to prepare for some of these item changes. I will link the patch notes in the video below so you can read them yourself. I always encourage that because my opinions aren't always correct. I could be missing something, forgetting something, and I would love to hear if I did, right? If you found something in these patch notes that I missed, please comment that below. I'd love to talk about it. But either way, I appreciate you guys taking the time to watch this video. Hope you learned something. If you did, you can always like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitch. I'm at StoopChild with 3 O's there as well. And actually still my first 50 followers there are going to be entered to win a awesome skin. So I already gave a couple away for my first 50 YouTube subscribers, but doing the same thing for Twitch. So again, thank you guys for watching. I'll keep getting these videos out there as long as you guys appreciate them. So thank you so much. I'll talk to you guys next time.